Hi guys, welcome to Rufio, it's Joe here. I wanted to do something slightly different today. So, as you very well know, nobody reads anything in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I've been a little bit bored with my time off, and I'm not going to lie, I've had to come up with some ideas of what to do. So, I decided that I would do us all a favour and read through the rulebook with you, because, let's be honest, nobody reads anything in this game, particularly not cards, and certainly not the rulebook. We tend to make it up as we go along. So, I figured I would go through this with you today, so feel free to join me in reading the rulebook, because let's be honest, this is probably the first time you've ever actually seen it. Now, I will first point out that the rulebook here, version 9, is it only does up to Master Rule 3, so there will be some bits in there that don't cover links, and there might be some slightly different bits. We'll sort of skip over those. But anyway, let's read this through for you, because, well, you're not going to do it yourself, are you? So, let's take a look, shall we? So we start off with the title page, just whatever the contents, I suppose, all that crap. What is the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game? With the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, you can take part in an exciting card game action as seen in the family of Yu-Gi-Oh! TV and comic mega hits. In this game, two players duel each other using a variety of monsters, spells, and trap cards to defeat their opponent's monsters and be the first to drop the other's life points to 0. Everything you need to start playing is in this deck. Well, apparently this is a deck, so there you go, guys. Well, enjoy it. But there are thousands more cards to choose from, so collecting additional cards in booster packs will let you customize your deck and increase your chances of winning. Now, in reality, we're going to go out and buy singles because we're not kids. I mean, I enjoy cracking product like everyone else, but you just buy the singles, right? Anyway, so this is the official Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game rulebook. It is important to learn how to play correctly. That's right, guys. If you learn how to use the fucking rules, then you'll be within Konami's demands for playing this game. So you should read this rulebook before playing if you are new to the game. Now, honestly, how many out of you have actually read through this? I'll be honest, I probably did when it first came out, but I kind of winged it the rest of the time, so we'll read for you. Understanding the rules will help you make the best use of your cards, so keep the rulebook handy during your first few games. You can also visit www.yugiOhcard.com for more information. So, the trick here, guys, is to read the rulebook, I suppose. So, about the game, create your own deck. With thousands of cards to choose from, you can create and customize your own deck with your favourite cards. Every duelist will have their own unique deck, completely different from every other duelist deck, which makes it really exciting to play. I don't know if they've played their own game. Completely different from every other duelist deck. Yeah, maybe not. Battle with fantastic monsters and great combos. Now that bit's true, I suppose. Even if a card does not have enough power on its own, it may become more powerful when combined with other cards. It is fun to collect all the different cards available and create your own combos and unleash them in a duel. Or copy someone else's combos and unleash those in a duel. Power up your deck with booster packs. Booster packs are released every few months. Is it every few months? I'm pretty sure it's like every month now, right? Anyway, every few months, bringing new cards and new combos to add new strength to your deck. Duels evolve every time a new booster pack is released, keeping your duels cool and exciting. I suppose that part is true. Right, so, things you need to duel. So, getting started section. Assemble your favourite cards into a deck that follows these rules. So, your main deck should be between 40 and 60 cards. Now, back in the grass days, I would happily have put 100 cards in my deck, but there you go. And to anyone who doesn't play this game properly, you'll probably put however many you like in there. Your deck must be 40 to 60 cards. You can only have up to 3 copies of the same card in your deck, extra deck, and side deck combined. Also, some cards are forbidden limited and semi-limited in official tournaments. Try to keep your deck close to the 40 card minimum. Having a deck with too many cards makes it hard to draw your best cards when you need them. This deck is called your main deck. Now, obviously, contrary to popular opinion, sometimes 60 cards is actually better than 40, but that's usually in decks where you don't want to draw combo pieces and you'd rather draw extenders and search them from your deck and what have you. Or, of course, when Grass Looks Greener was around, 60 card was infinitely better. Extra deck, 0 to 15 cards. The monster deck consists, the extra deck consists of XE monsters, Synchro Monsters, and Fusion Monsters, and now, of course, we have Link Monsters, which isn't included in this, which can be used during the game if you meet certain requirements. The rules for the extra deck are you can have up to 15 cards in the extra deck. The extra deck contains XE's monsters, Synchro Monsters, and Fusion Monsters in any combination. These cards are not counted towards the 40 card minimum limit of your main deck. Side deck is 0 to 15 cards, and we won't go through that because nobody cares. Additional items you may need. Now, this is somewhat controversial, I suppose, because it mentions here that you can use a calculator, which, if I'm not mistaken, is still not supposed to be allowed. Although that could have been changed with the new rules, I suppose. But there you go. This is older news. So you may need a coin. For a coin toss. You may need a dice, because some cards use it. I don't know anyone that actually really uses cards with dice involved. It's usually just to decide who goes first and second. Counters, yep, you'll probably need those, especially with the new upcoming decks that are coming out, which will be abusing spell counters, I suspect. You can use small objects like glass beads, paper clips, not anal beads, or pennies for the counters, which are then placed on these face-up cards. Now, I will note that they have introduced a rule that your counters cannot be obstructive, and I believe it's the same for monster tokens. You get people doing stupid shit, like, I don't know, bringing out a fucking Bible and using a copy of that as a token, which before probably wasn't mentioned. Tokens can be used to represent monsters that can be created by card effects. Any object can be used for a token, needs to have two distinct ways to place it that it can clearly indicate the monster's battle position, which will be attack or defense mode. Items which can help during a duel are calculators to maintain your life points. I always recommend using pen and paper. I actually got one of those little pads where you can delete the what you draw, and it's like a fucking Etch-a-Sketch thing, but it's like the size of a phone. They're really, really handy, although now I never have a pen to sign off my slips. However, at regional events and stuff like that, definitely take pen and paper. Card sleeves, they should all be the same. It should prevent your cards from getting bent and scratched. For those who aren't aware, and I'm sure you are, you should not double sleeve. I don't believe it says it here, but you shouldn't. Bit of a shame, but apparently we can't be trusted not to do naughty things with it. So, there you go. The game map, we'll skip over this part because this is relevant only to when Pendulum Summoning just come out. Here we go. How to read a card. Game cards. Okay, so this bit should be interesting for some of you. Now, I know even the most advanced players out there don't read their fucking cards, and I'm included in that, so let's learn how to read them, shall we? So, at the top you have a card name. So in this example, we have Blue Dragon Summoner. Attribute Wind. Level 4. That's your stars there. Card number, that's a little code here, mostly used for eBaying to decide whether you're getting ripped off in a trade or not. Card description, well, mostly it's effects now rather than just descriptions. Type, which type it is, and attack and defense. Of course, Link monsters don't have a defense at all. Card name, level, attribute, blah, 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 blah. That's pretty much it, and that's how you read a card. So if you actually read the card's effects, you can actually find out what happens. What is a monster card? Monster cards are used to battle and defeat your opponent. Battles between monsters are the foundation of any duel, unless you play Chainburn, in which case, fuck you. There are many kinds of monster cards. The game is more than a simple slugfest. Well, it never used to be. So monsters with high attack and defense points will not be enough. There are also monsters with strong special effects, even though their attack and defense points are low. Therefore, success in a duel depends on how skillfully you can make use of different kinds of cards. Let us take a look at different kinds of monsters. So there are normal monsters, which are your vanillas. They have no effects. Effect monsters, which have effects, and they come in 4 different types. Continuous, ignition, quick, and trigger. So continuous effect. This is an effect that's active while the effect monster is face-up on the field. The effect starts when the face-up monster appears on the field and ends once the monster is gone or no longer face-up on the field. There are no triggers for this activation. The monsters are most useful if you have a strategy to protect them whilst they're on the field. This is important for you guys because most of you people don't seem to know the difference between all of these, and it's incredible. Ignition effects. You can use the type of effect just by declaring its activation during the main phase. Blah, blah, blah. There are some ignition effects which have a cost to activate, like discarding cards from your hand, tributing a monster, or paying life points. Because you can choose when to activate this type of effect, it is easy to create combos with them. Cost, an important thing, guys. Make your opponent pay costs before you decide to respond to them. Yeah, for a variety of reasons. Quick effect. So these special monster effects, and this is something they brought in with PSCT, which wasn't there and around before. A quick effect is something that can activate even during your opponent's turn. These type of effects have spell speed of 2, even though all other monster effects have a spell speed of 1. Since it's difficult for your opponent to predict these cards, they can give them an unexpected surprise, formerly called multi-trigger effects. During either player's turn, when an effect is activated, you can target one card in your go and special summon it. Cool. Trigger effect. These effects are activated by specific times, or at specific times rather, such as during the standby phase or when the monster is destroyed. These type of cards can make for great combos, but it's easier for your opponent to predict what will happen, so they may try to stop you. When this card is destroyed by battle into the graveyard, target one card in the field, destroy that target. Flip effects. You don't really see much of these anymore. Flip effects are part of the trigger effect, so it's an effect when something's flipped face up. Basically, it'll say flip in big capital letters on the card, and it's not intended to offend you, not flipping someone off. Pendulum Monster cards. Hey, everyone's favourite. So these are monsters and spells. Yay. They can be summoned in attack or defense, and you can activate them as spell cards in your pendulum zones, blah, 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 blah. They're broken. Summon mechanic is busted. How to pendulum summon. We now have the pendulum zones in the back of here. I'm sure you are familiar with this already. It's been like that for a while. If you're not, these things don't exist anymore. So anyone who bought any cool mats with pendulum zones, press F, I suppose. You put them here and then you spam a load of shit. XE Monsters. XE Monsters, pronounced Xyz, sorry, are powerful kinds of monsters. You can summon them by overlaying some stuff and getting some broken effects. They have ranks and they have materials and they detach stuff for cost and do things. You stack them over. These are no longer treated as monsters, guys. They are just materials. They're not even on the field. So if you have one of them cards that says when it leaves the field or monster goes to grave, whatever, it doesn't get its effects. Synchro Monsters, so they have been around for a while now. They're placed in the extra deck, and they get summoned to the extra monster zone like all these other ones. They require a combination of tuners and non-tuners to make them. Tuners are used for synchro summoning, and they will say on there, tuner. Not tuna as in the fish. How to synchro summon. I'm sure you've got this figured out by now, but during your main phase, you can declare a synchro summon when the combined total levels of a face-up tuner monster and any number, blah, 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 and it meets all the requirements, and then you can just send them to grave and you get your synchro. Fusion monsters. Normally you use polymerization to do a fusion, however, many of them will be void of this, I suppose. They have their own contact fusion is the thing, and a variety of other fusion spells, so that we don't need to use poly anymore. It's very rare that this actually gets used in any kind of viable strategy, I suppose. We move on to Ritual Monsters, relevant at the moment because Necros has just got their reprint, although I don't ever really see much of Necros getting summoned with their spells because they kind of like double up as hand traps and things, so they kind of do a 50-50 job, I suppose. Ritual Monsters are special summon monsters that are special summoned from the specific Ritual special summon card, along with the required tributes, blah, 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 blah. This one used to be good, it is not very good anymore. Summoning monster cards. If they are level 1 to 4, they're no tributes. Level 5 to 6, you need to tribute a monster on field. Level 7 or higher is 2 tributes. Everyone knows this by now, I'm confident. And setting monsters is when you put them in face down defense position. If it's in face down defense position, it's not considered summoned. That is something to keep in mind. If it's attacked or anything happens, it gets flipped up, or it can be flipped up itself the following turn. You can not only normal summon or set once per turn. I've seen plenty of people. To be fair, I've probably done this enough times myself, where I go through a turn and I'm like, have I normal summoned? Well, I don't know. If it's my opponent smart, they'll just tell me yes. Although you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to do that. Both players are responsible for maintaining the game state. Flip summon is when you've set it and then the next turn you flip it up. A special summon, you can do a gazillion of these a turn unless something tells you can't. Special summon with a card's effect, so that's an interesting, actually, a differentiation there. So special summon is when it's done by itself. I believe people refer to these as inherent special summons, and then you get special summon with a card's effect. This is important when you get cards like the Solemn Brigade come up, because some can stop one type and the others can't stop the others, and stuff like Horn of Heaven and all that crap. How to read a card. Here we go again, guys. It teaches us how to read cards. If you read cards, you will find out exactly what they fucking do. I know this is a difficult concept. Difficult for me as well, because I'll be honest with you, I don't read cards either. So here's a one-off opportunity where we take the time to read something we're supposed to. So, spells and trap cards. They will tell you what they are at the top. If they are purple, then is it purple? Are they pink? I guess pink. Then they have to be set for a turn first, unless it's stuff that people actually use, like infinite impermanence and evenly matched, in which case you never end up putting them on the field most of the time anyway. And then spells, they've got a bunch of exciting stuff, and they're green. Used to be called magic cards. I'm pretty sure they got sued over it or got told to change it for whatever reason. So if you have any cool old cards with magic in there, it's a good flex on people to say that you're activating your magic card. Card name, it's at the top. Type, it will tell you if it's a spell or trap. We have icons, which dictate what type they are. Equip, ritual, field, continuous, quick play, counter. If you're still not familiar with these, I've already released a video which teaches you how these all work. Spell cards can normally be activated during your main phase. There are some that can be used outside of this. Spell cards have many powerful effects, like destroying other cards, strengthening monsters. Save these cards in your hand until you can get the best results out of them. General kind of rule, spells are going to make up the majority of your spell and trap allocation for a deck, because traps are slow, and certainly too slow for the modern game. So they have to be really, really impactful to be worth using. Hand traps have kind of replaced them in that they are just vastly better. Right, okay. So, normal spells, they can just be used straight away. Ritual spells, to do ritual summons. Continuous spell cards, they just stay there and get in the way. Quick spells kind of just stay there. They're equipped to a monster. If the monster leaves the field, usually these will too, or they're destroyed or whatever. Field spell cards, they just sit there and do things. Most of them are crap. Quick play spells, these are good. Can be used during your opponent's turn and your own turn, and if they're in your hand and your opponent does something, you can activate them immediately from hand without having to have them on the field first, which is kind of neat. Trap cards, normal trap cards have to be set for a turn before you can use them. Trap hole, if your opponent flips trap hole on you, just scoop, because they are living in a different era to you. Continuous trap cards also just sit there for ages. Counter trap cards, these are good, usually quite powerful, and can only be stopped with other counter trap cards because of spell speeds. Yeah, pretty much all you need to know about traps, I suppose. How to play, let the duel begin. How to duel and how to win. The reality of this versus what actually happens may be somewhat different. A single game is called a duel. A duel ends in one player wins, or the game ends in a draw. Duels are played in sets of 3, and it's best out of 3. To win a duel, you start with 8,000 life points, and to win, you have to reduce their life points to 0. There are some other ways to do it. So your opponent is unable to draw any more cards when they're supposed to draw. That will also be a victory condition, and with a card special effect such as the classic Exodia. And there are some people out there who don't seem to realise that it's a win condition. Like, as soon as it's in your hand, you win instantly. There are some weird scenarios come up where both players end up with Exodia in their hand simultaneously. I'm not going to go into that now. It ends with some fun and games. Preparing to duel. After greeting your opponent, shuffle your deck thoroughly. So no stacking, bitches, because we know some of you out there will try it. Then you may shuffle and cut your opponent's deck. This is really, really important. Be careful when touching your opponent's cards. I've had some people just ham-fist the shit out of my stuff. Pretty annoying when I've got £600 worth of cards in your hand. Not cool. Then we go on. After cutting, place the decks face down in the proper deck zones on the field. This never happens. And if using an extra deck with Exceed, Summon, Synchro, Fusion, Links, put it face down the extra monster zone. Extra deck zone. Sorry, not your extra monster zone. That'd be pretty broken. Both players show each other their side decks. What? And record the number of cards. Okay, I've literally never done this. Most people just go, yeah, it's in my deck box. It's fine. Everyone's using 15. It's very rare and it's going to do anything less than that. Apparently they should be counted. I mean, I guess that makes sense, because if you're siding in and out, it means they're not leaving extra stuff in there. Show the number of cards remains the same. Yeah, okay, it makes sense. No one does it. Play rock, paper, scissors, or flip a coin. Literally neither of these things happen. Everyone just does a dice roll. High roll normally gets to decide. The winner decides to go first or second in the duel. For your next duel, the loser of the previous duel decides who goes first. This is a really important part of the game, guys. Learn how to roll a dice and land a 6 every time, and then you'll be good. If the previous duel ended in a tie, determine who starts the next with another coin toss, etc. Finally, draw 5 cards to the top of your deck. This is your starting hand. Now, during your first player's turn, they don't actually draw. They get skipped for the first turn. So if you start and you go first, you only start with 5 cards. If you're going second, then when you draw, you go through your normal draw phase. So draw phase, standby phase. It's really important, guys, actually. The amount of people I see that don't actually talk through what phases they are, and it's really fucking annoying, because it's like draw phase, standby phase. Like, I will always announce these. Go into main phase. Like, honestly, if you're playing someone and they're going really quick and they're just like, they're in main phase and suddenly they're declaring an attack, you can stop them. You can go before you enter battle phase, because a lot of the time, the effects that you want to go off when you are satisfied that they finish whatever plays they're going to make and you would like to interrupt them. It's a really important part of becoming a better player, is to be able to interrupt at the correct times, making sure your opponent follows this chart, this flow, is kind of important to get the best out of yourself, I would say. And yeah, if you follow through all of these, it will just help you like remember card effects that are like not mandatory. Like actually saying end phase will remind you of stuff like Scum if you're playing Burning Abyss, things like that. And yeah, that's basically it. So, and then it goes on to the second player's turn. So you go draw phase, standby phase, main phase, battle phase, main phase 2, end phase. You can skip from main phase straight to the end phase. Yeah. Draw phase. This is the first phase. The players whose turn it is, the turn player, draws one card from the top of their deck. A player who has no cards left in their deck and is unable to draw loses the duel. After you draw, trap cards and quick play cards, quick play spell cards can be activated before proceeding to the standby phase. The player who goes first cannot draw during the draw phase of their first turn, as I've already covered. Main activation is phase, draw one card, and then you can activate traps and quick play spells, etc. You can do this in the draw phase. So at the moment, one of the common things, particularly with Salamangrates doing the rounds, is they'll activate the circle and then get that added card because draw can only be activated in the main phase. Anyway, just a cool little tip out there. Standby phase. Some cards have effects that activate in there, a cost you must pay during the standby phase. If you don't have any of these cards on the field, you can still activate traps and or quick play spells before moving on to your main phase 1. Main phase 1, so you can summon or set monsters, you can change your monster's battle positions, you can activate a card or effect, you can set spells and traps, then you proceed to the battle phase once both players have agreed. This is the case with every single phase. You will say what you want to do, gives your opponent a chance to respond. You should do this in between using cards too. Lots of people don't do it. It's really basic etiquette and you're a fucking idiot if you don't. Now it's time to battle with your monster cards. This phase is divided into steps. You do not have to conduct a battle phase every turn, even if you have a monster on the field. The player who goes first cannot conduct their battle phase on their first turn. Again, you should really know all this by now. I'm assuming you're not idiots, you're just not capable of reading the rulebook like everyone else. Possible actions in this phase: battle with monsters, activate trap cards and quick play spell cards. You see, you have your start step. This is really important. Like, a lot of people don't know how this works. Even now, I still get a little bit confused. It seems straightforward until you're actually doing it. Flow of the battle phase: you have your start step, you have your battle step, you have the damage step, and then you have the end step. So the battle phase is split into 4 steps, and is conducted in the order shown on the diagram. The battle phase and damage step are repeated each time you attack with a monster. The start step. This step starts at the battle phase. The player should announce, "I'm entering the battle phase." Remember, the player who goes first cannot conduct a battle phase during their first turn. The battle step: select one monster on your side of the field, attack with it, and one of your opponent's monsters as your attack target, or directly, of course, if they don't have any monsters. And then declare the attack. If your opponent does not have any monsters on the field, you can attack directly, like I just said. The play then proceeds to damage step. Afterwards, the attacking player returns to the battle step and repeats the procedure. Each face-up attack position monster you control is allowed to attack once per turn, unless the card says otherwise, which happens very frequently. You do not have to attack with one monster if you do not want to. Let's say one monster. You don't have to attack with a monster. Damage step. In this step, the players calculate the result of battle, and whatever damage is done, see Monster Battle Rules, page 37, whatever. After the damage step, returns the battle step. End step. After you resolved all of your battles by repeating the battle and damage steps, you have no more monsters you want to attack with. You can announce your opponent that you're ending a battle phase. Again, your opponent has to agree to this, so cards like Evenly Matched will often get dropped on you. This is when it happens, and then you get absolutely cucked. Replay rules during the battle step. This is really important. This, again, comes up loads. After you've announced that you're attacking monster and the attack target monster during a battle phase, blah, 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 the attack target may be removed from the field, or a new monster may be placed into the field in the opponent's side of the field before the damage step due to a card's effect. This causes a replay. When this occurs, you can choose to attack with the same monster again, or choose to attack with a different monster, or choose not to attack at all. Note that if you attack with a different monster, the first monster is still considered to have declared an attack, and it cannot attack again. So the ideal situation in this scenario is that when you declare an attack and your opponent summons a new monster randomly, you continue to attack with the first one that you intended to, because otherwise you miss the opportunity to do so, because you have declared the attack. The only difference is that your target could change. And then, yeah, this is what we call a replay happening. Main phase 2. If you conducted your battle phase, your turn moves to main phase 2. Afterwards, the action the player can perform in this phase is the same as main phase 1. However, if the player already did something in main phase 1 that has a limit to the number of times it can be done, the player cannot do it again. Nice try. I know some of you will try it. Happens all the time. Consider if you want to activate and set and spell trap cards or summon and set a monster if you do not do that in main phase 1. Based on your situation after the battle phase, use this time to prepare for your opponent's turn. Possible actions: summon, set, change battle positions, activate a card or effect, set spell and trap cards. End phase. Announce the end of your turn. So if there are any cards which say during the end phase in their text, resolve those effects in this phase. If you have more than 6 cards in your hand at the end of the end phase, select and discard cards to the graveyard until you only have 6. Actions in this phase: resolve card effects which activate in the end phase, discard cards if you have more than 6, activate trap cards and quick play spell cards. If you have multiple effects that happen in the end phase, you can dictate the order in which they happen. This can be important in different scenarios, stuff like when we had Card Demise and Amano Wato doing the rounds with True Draco. You could do it so that you would discard and then add a Mono back to hand, so that you fulfilled. You'd lose whatever cards you had in hand before adding it back to hand, and therefore still have a card to play with. But anyway, not very important, but it does come up occasionally. Battles and chains. Again, something that people don't seem to understand very well. Chain resolution and how it works. So during the damage step, there are limits on what cards you can activate. Also during the damage step, flip effects resolve a bit differently than they normally do. So limitations on activating cards. During the damage step, you can only activate counter trap cards or cards with effects that directly change the monster's attack and defense. Also, these cards can only be activated up until the start of the damage calculation. Attacking a face down card. So if you attack a face down card, it's flipped up, at which point you then can conduct the calculation for damage. Activation of flip effects. So when the attack monster is flipped face up, any flip effects are applied and resolved after damage calculation. If you need to select a monster for the flip effect to target, you cannot target a monster that has already been destroyed during damage calculation. Determining damage. So you have the attack first defense, or if they have the same. So if you attack a monster with higher defense than your attack, you will take damage. If you attack a defense position monster where your attack is higher, they won't take any damage, but it will be destroyed. If it's a tie, neither player takes any damage. You also get what's called pierce, which is kind of cool. So it's attack and defense, basically the same thing works out. If you attack an attack position monster, difference is done, monster's destroyed. If you're attacking yours is lower, your monster's destroyed, and you take the difference. And again, pierce will go through a defense position monster's defense and inflict the difference as damage. If there are no monsters on your opponent's side of the field, you can attack directly. The full amount of attacking monster's attack is subtracted from your opponent's life points as battle damage. Remember, all of these rules are standard unless they are overridden by a card's text in the game. Chains and spell speed. So chains are a way to order the resolution of multiple card effects that are used when the effects of more than one card are activated at once, or when a player wants to use an effect after a card has been played, but before that card has an effect on the game. If a card's effect is activated, your opponent is always given a chance to respond with a card effect of their own choice, creating a chain. If your opponent responds with an effect, then you can choose to respond to that effect and create another link on the chain. If your opponent does not respond, you may activate a second effect. It's really important that you don't just go chain. Your opponent has an opportunity to respond. That's something that's important to know. Both players continue to add effects until the chain is finished, and then neither player wants to add anything, and then you can resolve the outcome in reverse order. So whatever happened last is what happens first on resolution, and it continues like that. This is really, really important technique for especially newer players who are up and coming in the game. Is to learn to build your chains correctly, because it makes a huge difference. I've had a few people call me out, particularly Jamie the Kid. I'll give him props while I'm here. When we're playing, he'll be an absolute dick to me, and rather than just let me go, yeah, you know exactly what I'm going to do, he'll make me build my chains, because he knows that if I fuck up, he can cane me for it. So really, really important to learn to build those guys. You must always be careful not to resolve the effects of your cards before asking your opponent if they wish to make a chain. Again, always give them the opportunity to respond. And it's worth noting that in the middle of the resolution, they can't just randomly fucking slap stuff in there. It doesn't work like that. Spell speed. Every type of card effect has a spell speed between 1 and 3. Sometimes you have cards that we refer to as spell speed 4, something like Super Poly. It's not actually a legitimate term. We just say it because it cannot be responded to. like by nothing. So if you ever hear someone say that, it's usually because they're referring to a card being pretty broken. If you want to respond to a card effect in a chain, you have to use an effect with a spell speed 2 or higher, and it cannot have a lower spell speed than the effect you're responding to. Please see page 41 for an introduction to each type of card speed spell. So spell speed. Spell speed 1 is normal, equip, continuous, field, and ritual, ignition, trigger, and flip effects of monsters. Yep, typically they can't be chained to chainlink 2 or higher, blah blah blah. Spell speed 2, traps, normal, continuous, quick play spells, effect monsters and quick effects. These will be the most common ones that are getting used between spell speed 1 and spell speed 2. Spell speed 3 is counter traps. Specifically, these can only be responded to by another spell speed 3, which is another counter trap, which means you can't say Solemn Judgment something, your opponent goes, chain quick effect of my monster that is going to get killed. They can't do it. It's not going to happen. So how a chain works, so here you go, it's a nice little diagram, it's pretty straightforward. You create your chain, so these all go through. So spell speed 1 or 2 card can be used, spell speed 2 or 3 can be used in response, spell speed 2 or 3 can be responsive to that, and so on, so on, so on, so on, until you hit chaining 3, and then only chaining 3s can be activated, and then when you've decided to finish, you then reverse the order, and that's the order in which it is resolved. Example of a chain. A player plays Heavy Storm. Man, this card is never coming back. And player B responds by activating their Threatening Roar. Then player A responds by activating Seven Tools Mana. This duel is straight up like 15 years old, honestly. Maybe even longer than that. Jesus. So Heavy Storm, then they respond Threatening Roar, and then it gets negated with Seven Tools the Bandit. And it happens in reverse order, so Threatening Roar gets negated, and then Heavy Storm will resolve at the very end. And that's pretty much it. Turn player's priority. This is a really cool thing to get your head around. Something that a lot of people don't. And a lot of the time, like little bits like this, is the difference between a top player and a decent player. Or the difference between a shit player and a decent player. And it is learning the basics of these kind of things. A lot of the time you'll learn it from getting scolded by better players, and that's usually how I learn, because like everyone else I don't read, apart from in this video apparently. So just, yeah, something to consider. Anyway, the turn player always starts with priority, or the choice to activate a card first, in each phase or step of their turn. As long as the turn player has priority, the opponent cannot activate cards or effects, except for effects that activate automatically, like trigger or flip effects. The turn player can either use priority to play a card or activate an effect, or they can pass the priority to the opponent so that they can activate an effect. The player must pass priority to opponent when moving on to the next phase or step. Strictly speaking, you should always declare that you're passing priority before the end phase of every phase. And this is what I was saying about earlier, declaring when you want to move to the next phase. Both players have to agree to go there, and that gives your opponent a chance to respond and say, actually, before you do, I would like to do this. And that will then pass the priority back to you if you would actually like to continue some steps that you wouldn't have done in the first place. That's also important to learn to do. So a player must pass priority, blah, blah, blah. Ask your opponent to play a card. However, for ease of play, announcing the end of your phases or steps implies giving up priority, which is exactly what I said there. Therefore, when announcing the end of your phase, your opponent, you can say, before the end of your phase, activate this card. Again, really important. A lot of people don't do this, and it is a huge difference in how your game goes. So the turn player starts with priority to activate a card or effect. After a card's activation and at the end phase or step, the priority passes to the opponent. Other rules, forbidden and limited cards. So a lot of people just ignore this because they play casually, and that's fine, I suppose. I don't really understand why you would just play it on your own weird terms. I guess some people like to play older formats. Normally your deck, including extra deck and side deck, can contain up to 3 copies of a card that has the same name. However, certain cards have specific quantity restrictions. That means that you can only have 3 copies of a card, usually 2 or 1, depending on if it's limited in some way, or potentially banned. That means you can't rock up at locals with Pot of Greed and 6 copies of Engage in your deck, like a certain player did at ours. Yeah. Anyway, so there are 3 types of restrictions. Limited cards restricted to 1, semi-limited to 2, forbidden to 0, or, of course, they are not on the list at all, in which case it's 3, providing they are legal to use. For a variety of reasons they may not be, usually because they're not real cards, or they were, like, printed and not released in that region yet. Whatever. You also have monster tokens. They appear on a field as a result of a card effect. So some people will use actual cards for these. Some people will just use like a dice, whatever. What you should be able to do though is use them in a way that it can be determined what position they're in. More often than not, they're not staying on the field long enough for it to matter, because they're usually getting linked off in the modern game. Tokens can't be used as XE material. A lot of the time they can't be attributed either, but it just depends on what the card says. Public knowledge. This is something to get your head around as well, because there are certain things you do not have to tell your opponent, and that they do not have to tell you. So the number of cards in a player's hand and decks, and cards in their graveyards, and each player's current life points are all public knowledge. So if your opponent asks to know how many cards are in your hand, that's absolutely fine. They must tell you. However, they don't have to tell you what the contents are. The number of cards in the deck can, I guess, be requested. It's not something that people normally ask. It's only normally if they're looking at it and they think that you've got like a 60 card deck, you'll get some people will ask. Especially if you've got, like, say, new sleeves, and it makes your deck look a bit bigger, because they'll be interested to know what kind of strategy they're probably playing up against. The life points are public knowledge. Both players know this. If asked, you must answer these things to your opponent truthfully. You are allowed to pick up and verify the cards in your opponent's graveyard, but you must ask for permission first. Also, you may not change the order of cards when verifying their graveyard. This happens a lot of the time accidentally in the game. It really does. Generally, it's not a big deal, but it is something that you should be looking to do. If both players conduct actions simultaneously, for cases like each player targets one monster where both players resolve an effect simultaneously, the turn player resolves the effect first. In this example, after that, the turn player makes their selection, then the other player makes theirs. When multiple cards are activated simultaneously, so the effects of spell speed 1 cards like trigger effects are activated in the same time, they're resolved on a special chain. So this chain is made using the turn player's effects. If there is only one effect that would be chaining one and there are 2 or more, then it builds a chain with the card effects like normal, selecting the order in which they would like to go on the chain. Then the opponent gives the chance to do their own, and then it resolves as normal. 0 attack monsters. Monsters 0 attack cannot destroy anything by battle. If 2 attack position monsters 0 attack battle, neither monster is destroyed. Because they don't have an attack, therefore they can't inflict damage / battle? I don't know. Rules versus card effect. So, if there's a discrepancy between the basic rules of a card effect and the card effect takes precedence. For example, if a monster can only attack once per turn, but the card effect says it can attack twice. Counters. You may need to place these on cards with some effects, blah blah blah. Most of the time people will just put a dice on there and then turn the number depending on what they want to have on there, especially with decks that revolve around counters. Actions which cannot be chained to. You can only create a chain by responding to the activation of a card or effect. Summoning a monster, attributing, changing a monster's battle position, and paying costs are not effect activations, and therefore you cannot respond to those using a chain. XE materials. Monsters that use those XEs summon are called XEs materials and are placed underneath the XEs monster to show that they are attached to it. Monsters that have become XEs materials are not treated as cards in the field. Again, really important to know when you have effects that go off when they go to grave. When an XE monster leaves the field, all of the materials go with it and are sent to the graveyard. If an XE monster is flipped face down and becomes controlled by the opponent, the materials are not sent to the graveyard, they remain attached to the monster. Leaves the field. Some monsters have an effect that activates when they leave the field. For example, these effects activate when a monster is sent to the graveyard or banished or is returned to the hand or extra deck. When a monster on the field is shuffled into the main deck or becomes an XE material, it is no longer a card on the field. However, its effects that activate when it leaves the field will not activate. And that's essentially it. Then we go on to a glossary which explains how everything works. So attack directly is attacking with nothing in the way. Just going straight for the life points. Banish cards, it was previously known as remove from play. Battle damage is what's calculated when 2 monsters battle. Cards in the field are cards in the field. Control is who has the card. Destroy is destroy. Discard is discard. Effects of cards, yeah, they have effects. Equip cards, yeah. Equip monsters, yeah. Monsters are equipped with equips or equipped to another monster. Excavate is to so excavate is an interesting one. You reveal those cards to both players before you do anything else. Pot of Duality, I always get them mixed up. Duality, I think it is, does this. Original attack or defense, that is the number before it is changed. To pay a cost is to do something on activation. giving your opponent a chance to respond or something else to happen before the resolution happens as a whole. That's something you would do regardless of whether the effect resolves or not. Piercing battle damage is the difference between attack and defense being done to your opponent. Random. Okay, so there's no official rules on this. Most people agree. Take, for example, dangers. So you have a handful of dangers and you activate one and you want your opponent to choose one at random. It can be argued that if your opponent selects the card, even if it's face down, they may have a reason for doing so. It may be underhanded knowledge. They may have caught a glimpse at your card. Whatever. Usually most people will agree that if you just roll a dice and you number them like from left to right, whatever, it's the best way to do a random decision. Most people think that's okay. You get some people who are just dicks and don't want to do it, but that's whatever. Reveal is, yeah, you show it to both players. It becomes public knowledge at that stage. Yeah. Search your deck is when you look through your deck for something. Sent to the graveyard is when something's sent to the graveyard. When a banished card is moved to the graveyard, it is not considered to be sent to the graveyard. Important to know. Set is when you put something face down. Shuffle is shuffling. Tributing is tributing. And that, my friends, is the Yu-Gi-Oh! Rulebook. I know that this is like a really scary step for you all. You may feel absolutely enlightened, I guess. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So, thank you very much for checking in. Hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully you've learned how to read cards. I know this is really difficult for most of us, myself included, apparently. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one. I'm afraid that's all we have time for in this video. If by chance you haven't had enough of listening to me waffle at you through a video about a children's card game, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter. The links are on the screen, or if you're feeling really lazy, you can click the links in the description. While you're at it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future content too. It'll make me smile, I promise. And who could ask for more than that? Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.